Hello everybody. We're going to have a wonderful discussion today about Colombian fine emerald jewellery. So I'm looking forward very much to be joined by Phil Spencer, who is the founder of London DE Fine Jewellery, who specialise in providing gorgeous pieces of Colombian fine jewellery, sometimes set with emeralds, featuring 18 karat gold, and we're going to talk all about Colombian emeralds and responsible sourcing, so I look forward very much to the discussion. We are also delighted to have your questions as we go, so please do feel free to ask us about Colombian fine jewellery and the mining industry in Colombia, artisanship in Colombia and so forth. So I'm just waiting now for Phil to join me. And when he does so, we will get underway. London DE Fine Jewellery are based in Hatton Garden, which is the diamond district of London, and they source their jewellery from their emeralds from Colombia, from the Boyacá region, and they are responsibly sourced emeralds. I can see. Oh, hello! I can see that we've got the head of the Colombian Emerald Exporters Association, Guillermo Galvez, joining us. Hi, Guillermo. Very nice for you that you're joining us today. The London DE Fine Jewellery, as I said, they're based in Hatton Garden. They've also recently opened an office in Dubai. Let me just see if I. So London DE Fine Jewellery have a small staff in Hatton Garden, the London Diamond District, and they have a very wonderful website. I can see actually Phil's having trouble connecting. Let me see if I can call. Trying to get. Yes, London DE has joined us. So hopefully we will have Phil with us momentarily, and then we'll get underway. Yes, I see the request. Fantastic, great. Now, it's always nervy at the beginning of these Insta lives, but we're together. We're underway. So hey Phil, how are you?
Good afternoon. How are you?
Great to see you. So how are things? Are you in Hatton Garden?
That's right. Yes, I'm in our offices at 25 Hatton Garden.
Fantastic. Right in the depths of the London Diamond Jewellery District. Well, that's great. So I introduced the company a little bit, but let me ask you perhaps to elaborate. I mean, tell us what is London DE Fine Jewellery? What are its main operations? And tell us a little bit of the story of the company as well.
Sure. Well, I founded London DE in 2013 when I saw a space in the market for ethically sourced diamonds and coloured jewellery in particular. We have a special focus on Colombian emeralds in particular. Since then, we've grown to a team of 10 people across 3 offices, and we're now operating in London, Bogota, Colombia, and also most recently in the DMCC in Dubai, in the United Arab Emirates. And we're now proud members of the Responsible Jewellery Council, the National Association of Jewellers, and the Assay Assured group as well.
Okay, excellent. So I just want to say to everybody, please do feel free to ask questions at any point during this conversation about Colombian emeralds, Colombian emerald fine jewellery, and indeed about London DE Fine Jewellery. Phil, tell us a little bit about the Colombian side of your operation then, and how you came to be involved with that as well. Tell us a little bit about where the Colombians that you use are sourced in Colombia, for example.
Sure. Well, we've been trading Colombian emeralds now for almost 10 years. So it seemed like a natural progression to actually start to manufacture and operate directly at source. So in 2020, we opened up a workshop and an office in the Emerald District in downtown Bogota, which is essentially the epicenter of the emerald trade in Colombia, and a few hours from the main sources of production in the Emerald Belts. So that has then given us the opportunity to actually source the stones directly from their country of origin, but also it means we can tap into the local knowledge and experience when it comes to sourcing the stones, cutting them, grading them, polishing them, setting them to fine jewellery, and adding the most value. as well as cutting out all the middlemen along the journey, and of which there are many. So it has a lot of advantages to us to have a direct operation in the country of origin.
Yeah. Just out of interest, is your workshop located near the museum, the Gems Museum in Bogota?
Yes, it's very near the Gold Museum, actually. Yeah, so it's in the downtown district, which is obviously one of the major dealing centres, but also it's where a lot of the local laboratories are based. A lot of the buyers as well congregate in that area. So it's the real hub of the industry down there.
Great. So we've got a question from Ruskels_L. Do you mine your own emeralds?
We don't at the moment, so this is an area that's obviously of interest to us, but we are focusing very much on the supply chain from the mine head downstream. The reason for that is that's where the best margins are, but also it de-risks it to some extent for us. Enormous amounts of uncertainty when it comes to actually mining the stones themselves. So for us at this stage in our life cycle, we are interested primarily in the sort of from the top tier distribution level downwards. But never say never. And at some point in the future, I dare say we will consider entering into the actual production side of the market.
Yeah, I just want to let you know that Guillermo Galvez, who is the president of the Colombian Emerald Exporters Association, is watching this in Instagram Live. So thanks very much for joining us, Guillermo. So Phil, could you tell us a little bit about, if you like, the mining side of the emeralds in Colombia that you use? Is it correct they're all from the Boyacá region? If you could just tell us a little bit about the mining side of the operations and how you came to be involved with the mining groups.
Sure. The main three mining regions for emeralds in Colombia are Muse, which is the most famous and most widely known. Then there is Cosquez and also Chivor, where some very, very fine stones are produced, but they're slightly less well known certainly outside of Colombia. So we source the majority of our material from Muse. But we also source some stones from other production sites as well. And mining, when people think of mining, they often think of huge industrial complexes and enormous plants and machinery and thousands of people. That's the imagery most people sort of form in their heads. But most of the mining, certainly in Colombia, is fairly artisanal. It's relatively small scale. It can be as basic as an individual, one person, operating with a shovel on a riverbank, for example, looking through alluvial deposits. Right through to some relatively large scale production, but nothing like you'd experience in the diamond industry, for example. So everything's on a much smaller scale. And because of that, it's obviously slightly less, or it's much less consolidated. It's a highly fragmented supply chain. So that's one of the sort of challenges with it, but also one of the opportunities, because of course, unlike many other sort of raw production methods, it actually presents some opportunities in terms of the economies of scale and some modernization that can help add value to the supply chain. So it's a double-edged sword. There's certainly a lot of opportunities that it presents, but also some challenges at the same time.
Yeah. We just got a message in from Guillermo Galvez, the president of the Colombian Emerald Exporters Association, saying that he would like to invite us to the opening ceremony of the Dubai Trade Fair next week. This is Jewellery, Gems and Technology in Dubai. There is a booth representing Colombia at the show. So please do pop in and introduce yourself, Phil, to Guillermo Galvez next week. Phil, could you tell us a little bit more about the working conditions in which the artisans are working in these mines in Colombia?
Certainly. I visited a number of the mines there, so I have some first-hand experience of the conditions and the environmental conditions, and also the labour conditions. And in the mines that I visited, they are all to a very high standard. There is obviously a certain amount of illegal activity going on, illegal mining, which has a lot of detrimental effects to the environment. There's a lot of exploitation of labour involved in that illegal activity. So one of the advantages of the sort of approach that we're taking is that we're actually taking market share away from that side of the industry, promoting the ethical side of it, which is performing as it should do in terms of its labour relations, environmental standards, and so on. So I think that's a very important message to get across. And certainly, it's not the case that all mines are in any way operating detrimentally to the people who live and work in them and around them. So we carefully select the ones that we source our stones from. We trace them right back to their point of origin, so that we have a good handle on the exact origin and the standards that have been applied right from the moment they're won from the earth.
Excellent. So could you tell us a little bit about how you select the emeralds that you use in your jewellery creations? I mean, clearly you have certain standards for quality, and you're looking for a certain type of colour. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about the types of colour you're looking for and how you source the emeralds that you buy.
Sure, yeah. So when people think of gemstones, they often think of diamonds, and people tend to think along the lines of their clarity. So everyone's heard of a flawless diamond, for example. You don't get flawless emeralds. They're all included, every single one of them, unless they're artificial and synthetic. But so the main criteria is firstly colour. So it's the depth of the colour, not too light, not too dark. Essentially a wine bottle green. So if you hold a bottle of wine, an empty bottle of wine into the sun, that's the sort of perfect emerald colour. Very, very hard to achieve, but that's the kind of the apex colour. So then following on from colour, there's then transparency. How clear is the stone? As I say, they'll never be without flaws, but some are obviously significantly clearer than others. And then it comes down to things like carat size, which obviously has an important impact, but not so much as colour and transparency. So the actual pricing of the stones is significantly harder to nail down, because there are so many variables involved in, and often it's done by eye. So it's not quite as scientific as it is with diamond grading and pricing.
And is it important in terms of your marketing to stipulate any inclusions and so forth, so that the customer knows exactly what they're getting?
Absolutely, yes. And certification is obviously a key part of it as well. So all of our stones, for example, go through testing at the CD Tech Gemological Laboratory in Bogota. And then some of our stones then go through further testing at, for example, Gubelin Laboratories in Lucerne, Switzerland, or SSEF in Switzerland, and sometimes GIA and other laboratories instead of or as well. So that is the real key to essentially proving the stone. So we know from the people we have working for us who have 30, 40 years experience of working with these stones, they know what they're looking for, but obviously we need to put something in writing from a recognized gemological source to state that it is what we say it is. And that's a very transparent process. There are a lot of certification bodies out there that are less strenuous than others in terms of their approach, but we've worked very closely with CD Tech over the years, and they are an extremely reputable laboratory. So we very much go by what they say, and also, as I say, follow on laboratory testing as well in some cases.
Okay, so before we get into the jewellery making side, we have a couple of questions. First one from AQSFJ636, who's one of our regular followers. Phil, how long have you been involved in the jewellery world? Has it been a lifelong love of yours?
Sure. Well, yes. The short answer is it's been a lifelong passion of mine, and I have close friends and family who've been working in the industry for many, many, many years. And for me, it's always been a passion that I've then managed to turn into a business. So that's a fantastic part of my life. I've actually been working directly in the industry for 10 years, but as I say, I have 30 plus years exposure to the industry, which has sort of brought me to where I am now.
Okay. The other question from Rascals_L is, I don't know how you'd answer this one. What is your monthly sales volume? Can you give some indication of business activity?
There's some commercial sensitivity there, but it's in the order of six figures, which is as far as I can really answer that.
Yeah. Good. So we do encourage questions just to keep the conversation lively. So do please ask anything you want about Colombian fine emerald jewellery. We'd be delighted to take them. So Phil, we've talked about the mining side of the emeralds. Let's now talk about the artisanship. Could you tell us a little bit more about your sort of jewellery making workshop in Bogota, and also tell us about the responsible sourcing and how you sort of audit that side of things?
Yeah, so we manufacture the majority of our emerald jewelry in-house in our workshop in Bogota. Certain items we occasionally outsource for specific reasons, but the majority is made in-house. And we also commission some pieces individually in London from local workshops that we know and trust here as well. So for us, the key is everything's handmade. So we don't use any kind of machinery or any kind of production line. Everything's handcrafted, whether that's ready to wear or bespoke. It all goes through that process, which makes it unique. So no two items would ever be 100% the same. And in terms of how we design the pieces, obviously our ready to wear items are sort of designed along the sort of current trends in the market and current sort of prevailing interest in the market. And the bespoke pieces are entirely at the discretion of the buyer. So literally any piece of jewelry your imagination can dream up, we can create in a matter of weeks. So that's typically how we operate on both sides of the market.
Okay, we've got a question from V945. Which countries can be competitors to Colombian emeralds? What are the other main origins you can highlight?
Well, in South America, the main competitor is Brazil. So there's a quite a large scale production of emeralds, particularly in Minas Gerais in Brazil, which has been not as long established as Colombia. I think the 1970s they began production there. Colombia began production many hundreds of years ago. Also in Africa, so Zambia produces a lot of emeralds. More recently, Ethiopia has started to produce emeralds, and other parts of East Africa. And then Afghanistan and Pakistan along the Swat Valley is also another site of production that's, I think, largely disrupted at the moment due to the events, the political events in Afghanistan. But that's certainly been a source of gemstones before. But out of all those areas, obviously I'm biased, but Colombian emeralds do have the reputation for being the finest quality in terms of colour, depth of colour, transparency, and the key sort of criteria that people apply to the pricing of the stones. So yes, there are there's some wonderful material that comes out of Brazil, Zimbabwe, and other countries, Zambia and other countries. But yeah, Colombians do have that reputation, a bit like an Italian sports car or a French wine. They have that national association with excellence.
Yeah. So could you explain a little bit more why there is a premium for Colombian emeralds over emeralds from other origins, such as Brazil? I know that, say, Ethiopian emeralds are gathering a good reputation in the market for quality, aren't they? But generally, there is this perception that Colombian emeralds are the premium emeralds. Why is that? I mean, are there geological reasons, or is it linked to marketing, or both?
Yeah, the main reason is that they do have that wonderful depth of colour. Not too light, not too dark on the actual apex of the curve. And also wonderful transparency. So they have fewer inclusions and less visible inclusions than many other stones from other parts of the world. So that's the main reason. And then leading on from that, obviously over the years, at one time 90% of the world's emeralds came from Colombia. I believe now it's dropped significantly to around half. But still, it's I believe the world's largest producer. So also there's the fact that it is a major national industry, and over many centuries, going back, I think it predates the Spanish occupation of South America. It goes back far. They have been produced in this region. So I think it's also that a historical legacy of the sheer longevity of the market there, that it's become anchored as one of the leading point of origin.
Good. So we have a couple of questions on treatments. Firstly, I'll combine the questions and then you can sort of give a stand-back answer. From Rascals_L, what's your view on different treatments of emeralds? Rascal says he's a novice looking to make his first purchase, so maybe he'll be buying from you. And then Zarza_by_Nivea asks, have there been even better treatments developed than oil to enhance the appearance of included emeralds?
Sure. So virtually every emerald that you'll find on the market has some sort of treatment. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's absolutely fine. As long as it's disclosed transparently and you know exactly what's being done to it. When it comes to treatment, there are certain treatments that you should avoid. So for example, hardened resins are something you should avoid because they can eventually damage the stone and it can actually break essentially over time. So resin dyes, certainly hardened resins should be avoided. So the only treatments to the stones we sell are either zero. We do sell no oil stones that have absolutely no treatment whatsoever. They're very rare and obviously at a high premium. But then we also supply some that have a minor oiling applied to them. And the oil itself, all it does is actually fills the surface reaching fissures in the stone. So every emerald contains fissures. Some of those fissures reach the surface. Those that reach the surface can be filled with a minor amount of oil. So that's simply all it does. And you can re-oil an emerald at any point in time. It's a very, very simple process. So it's not something that degrades the stone in any way. And it's a perfectly trusted treatment for them. In terms of the type of oils, traditionally they use cedar oil, which it works extremely well, but it's actually been surpassed now by various artificial oils which tend to be used, which are cheaper and actually more effective at doing what they do. So with cedar oil, it can actually wear down and degrade faster than the modern oils that are used. So actually, it's probably better to use the artificial oils than it is to use some of the traditional ones. But this is all disclosed, or it should be disclosed on the certificate of purchase. So there's full transparency when someone actually buys a stone. And then again, it's better to avoid heavily oiled stones because they will look significantly less attractive over time, and they may require significant oiling at future dates to maintain their luster. So I would suggest to aim towards no oil to minor oiled stones, certainly as our preference.
Yeah. So AQSFJ636 asks, is it possible to show us any of your pieces? Do you have any to hand? And if not, could you just direct us to where they can be found on the internet?
Certainly, I'm actually my safe is actually closed at the moment. I do have some examples that we show. I don't know if you can see those clearly.
Yeah, just show them close to the smartphone camera. That's great. Yes.
So this is an example of how they're formed, and literally these are rough stones that have been dug out of the ground in Colombia. We use these as examples to show people how they're formed. So they're usually found in, there's another example here, they're usually found in quartz. You can just see there the hexagonal crystal. So they're usually found in quartz as the host rock, often where pieces of iron pyrites, which is otherwise known as fool's gold, which you may be able to see more clearly from this sample here actually. You can see the peppering of iron pyrites across here on this quartz rock, and then the emerald crystals just forming there as a hexagonal cube. So that's how they're won from the earth, and they're literally cleaved or hacked out of the host rock, and then they're cut and polished and either faceted or formed into a cabochon shape for them to then be fitted into jewellery and actually sold to the end consumer. So that's the sort of process that's followed from literally this is how you'd find one in a mine, essentially. And then that leads through to eventually the actual finished piece of jewellery that you'd wear.
Yeah. Do you have any of those finished pieces to hand that you can show us, or can you just direct us to the website to look at the pictures of the jewellery that is available?
Yes, if you go onto our Instagram, london.d.e, then you can see some examples of some of our recent pieces. And there's quite a wide array of examples there that you can see.
Excellent. So V945 asks, how can one spot a genuine emerald as opposed to a fake?
Good question. Often the easiest way to spot an artificial emerald is that it looks too good. So as I mentioned before, most emeralds, every emerald contains inclusions. So if something is completely inclusion free, it's almost certainly not a natural emerald. So that's one of the key ways of identifying them. But then the safest way is to take them to a trusted laboratory. So, for example, CD Tech in Bogota, or there are many others around the world, such as SRS, Gubelin, GRS in London, and so forth, GIA. So they can then obviously give you a very detailed report, which will then tell you exactly where the stone, down to the region of origin, and obviously all of its characteristics and criteria.
Okay. The question we got from Jahan Zai BQ01, I'm afraid I don't quite understand it. If you could just rephrase that question, how long do you think Colombian emeralds can sustain the market requirement? Could you rephrase that question, and then we'll try and answer it for you, because I don't quite understand it. And then we've got a question from Where Diamonds Speak. What are artificial oils brands? Do you know what that means, Phil? What are artificial oils brands, or the names of the oils that are used in treatments, perhaps?
That I could find. I don't actually know to hand. I just know that they are used in the process. But I could certainly find out and ask our team in Bogota, because they use them on a daily basis.
Okay, so let's talk about the process of ordering a bespoke piece of Colombian fine emerald jewellery from London DE Fine Jewellery. First, tell us about the service that you offer, and second, how can people make appointments for a bespoke item of jewellery with you?
Sure. So as I mentioned before, that there's essentially two sides to what we do. We have a range of ready-to-wear items, many of which you can see on our Instagram and certainly on our website. And we also then do bespoke orders, which we produce in-house in most cases in Bogota. So the process is really very, very simple. If people are able to meet us face to face, we love to sit down and discuss things with people in person if we possibly can. So we have an office here in Hatton Garden in London, an office in Bogota, and an office in the DMCC in Dubai in the United Arab Emirates. So where it's possible, we always encourage people to come and visit us and come and see our stock and speak to one of our designers. If that's not possible, then we can do it by virtual consultation for anyone else who's interested. And then the process really follows the initial introductory meeting, whereby we talk about the budget that the customer has, what they're looking to achieve, any design ideas they've got, any time constraints they've got. People very often have a particular date in mind, such as a proposal date for an item of engagement jewellery. So all of this is discussed and fleshed out. The next stage is the actual design stage, where we actually use CAD, a mixture of CAD and sometimes hand-drawn imagery to present how the item will look once it's been created, which is a very, very important stage in the process. And obviously, at this point, any adjustments can be made, and there's no limit to what can be changed and adapted. Once that's finalised, we then go into the third and final stage, which is the production of the piece, which is handmade from scratch. And then once that's completed, we then size and fit them. And there's ongoing support in terms of resizing rings, any adjustments to chain lengths, and so on and so forth. And that's all free of charge and all part of the service. And that's an ongoing lifetime guarantee. So essentially, at any point in time, somebody can come back to us and say, actually, my fingers change size. For example, when ladies have children, sometimes their fingers change size, and then even if that's 5 years down the road, we'll still resize and adjust and accordingly.
Okay, so in the simplest terms, in order to make contact with you, if a potential customer wishes to DM your Instagram account, depending on where they live, they can figure out an appointment either in person or virtual.
That's correct, yeah. Yeah, and there's a variety of mediums for that, whether that's over the phone, whether that's on Zoom, whether that's face-to-face, or WhatsApp, or whatever it may be. We're very flexible.
Very good. So it's very much a digitized solution to a bespoke business. Quick question from Zarza_by_Nivea. Considering the fact that emeralds have inclusions, who or where do you think are the best emerald gem cutters?
I would say by far they are in Bogota. Because they're used to working with them every single day of the week. In some cases, they're guys that have been doing it for 50 years. So their skill set are second to none. Emeralds are quite a brittle stone. I believe they're about 6 or 7 on the Mohs scale. So they can break quite easily, and they often do. So there are a lot, for example, in London, there are a lot of setters and polishers who won't touch emeralds, because they're potentially liable for replacing them if they break them. So yeah, I would say that the highest skill set for that particular stone is in Colombia.
Yeah, and the question asked for clarification from Jahan Zai BQ01. He says, sure, I was pointing out that the supply of Colombian emeralds to the world market, how does that compare to other sources? So we touched on this earlier, but maybe our viewer just came in a bit later than the beginning. If you could just very briefly sum up, how do Colombian emeralds compare with emeralds from other parts of the world, and what is their relative reputation in the market?
Sure. So in sheer volume terms, they make up approximately 50 to 60% of the market. That's down from what was once a 90% market share some decades ago. In terms of how they compare to production from, for example, East Africa, Afghanistan, and Brazil, the general consensus opinion is that they are superior in colour and transparency. There's some arguments over that. Some people disagree, but the consensus is that they are the best colour and transparency, and that's really what sets them apart, and that's why they are so sought after and so highly valued.
Yeah. Could you tell us a little bit about how you see emeralds featuring in the development of the engagement ring market relative to, say, diamonds? Because traditionally, obviously, diamonds are seen as perhaps the main stones for engagement rings. But how do you see color gemstones faring now in terms of featuring in engagement jewellery, including Colombian emeralds?
Sure. I mean, as you rightly say, diamonds very much dominated the engagement ring market. That wasn't always the case. If you go back to Victorian times, actually half of engagement rings were coloured gemstones. So essentially, in the 20th century, that was largely altered by, for example, De Beers and their successful marketing campaigns, which at one point I believe drove to close to 100%, so in the high 90s% of engagement rings were diamonds at one stage. That has now reversed gradually over the past 2 decades. And now you'll see a lot of celebrity, for example, Megan Fox recently proposed with a diamond and emerald, a Colombian emerald and diamond engagement duo ring. You'll see, for example, a lot of royalty have set rubies and sapphires and emeralds into their wedding and bridal jewellery. So that trend, a lot of it's driven by celebrity endorsement. And just general trends and a drive towards individuality and being a little bit different from everything else that's out there. So there's a lot of transition in the market towards coloured gemstones, and it's the fastest growing sector of the jewellery market.
Would you say there's perhaps quite an interesting niche in the Gulf Middle East for, say, Colombian emerald jewellery, given that the abaya, the black dress worn by women, the abaya tones really well with green when vivid green is worn against the black? Would you say that factor is a factor that is encouraging, if you like, demand for Colombian emerald jewellery in the Gulf Middle East region?
Absolutely, and the GCC is a key market for us. So that's partly why we opened an office there earlier this year, and we're heavily promoting coloured gemstone jewellery in the Middle East. I think it's always been popular, but I think it's as elsewhere, it's rising in popularity, and there's an extremely affluent market in the Gulf states. So obviously the purchasing power is there as well. So that's, I would say, the key growth markets for us are Asia, but more specifically the Far East and the Middle East as our particular growth areas for the coming years.
Yeah. La Parra Jules asks, can one buy rough emeralds? I mean, might London DE Fine Jewellery potentially supply rough emeralds in a piece of jewellery if a client in a bespoke conversation wanted them? La Parra Jules say they like the organic shape before it's polished.
Absolutely. In fact, on our website, we do have some rough emerald charms, which have been very, very popular. So yes, we do supply rough emeralds, and they are becoming increasingly popular. I know also in the diamond market there are a number of rough diamond jewelry producers that are starting to gain some traction. So I think there's definitely a significant sub-market for rough gem jewelry.
Yeah, I mean, I think a trend has been identified that there is now increasingly a celebration, if you like, of imperfection. So there is more accommodation for jewellery that contains inclusions. For example, salt and pepper diamonds are very popular now among jewellery designers. We've got a question from Zarza _by_Nivea. In your own experience in the business, which social media platform has been the most successful for your jewellery sales?
So Instagram has been the most successful for us, and that's where we're placing our main emphasis. We've also actually found a lot of traction on LinkedIn. So a lot of resources have gone into that recently. I would say Facebook less so. We are active on Facebook as well as Pinterest and Twitter, but yeah, our main focus really is on Instagram and then on LinkedIn.
Yeah. V945 asks, can you make any comments about emeralds as potential investments? She says, in terms of investment, diamonds or emeralds, but when somebody were to buy a piece of your emerald jewellery from, featuring Colombian emerald, what should they think in terms of investment? I mean, do high emeralds go up in value, and if so, what might drive those prices potentially?
Yeah, so colour gemstones in general have gone up sharply over the last 15, 20 years. A good source of information on this is gemval.com, who produce colour gemstone price charts, which is a good way, a good visual interpretation of how the market's moving. And largely it's driven by consumer demand. So there was very low demand 20 years ago. That demand's risen. Production, as I mentioned earlier, is fragmented and unconsolidated. So that yawning gap between demand and supply has driven prices up. In terms of gemstones as an investment, yes, they're becoming increasingly popular. A lot of investment funds are now investing into treasure assets, so precious metals and precious stones, amongst other things. So they are now, especially with COVID and a lot of the uncertainty in a lot of the traditional financial markets, I think there's going to be a significant amount of investment going into rare gemstones and precious metals over the coming years as a hedge against some of the systemic risks that there are in the broader economy. Yeah.
The questioner V945 asked you to repeat the name of that website you had mentioned that talks about market prices. Could you just slowly repeat that name?
It's gemval.com. That's GEMVAL.com.
Okay, good. We've got a question from Zarza _by_Nivea. What about shows, exhibitions? Once COVID is, quote, under control, do you think that face-to-face selling of Colombian emerald fine jewellery will take over from online sales? I mean, clearly at the moment you've got a kind of a hybrid model, don't you? Because essentially people can come to you digitally through Instagram. How will things evolve as the pandemic, diminishes, hopefully, going forward?
Yeah, I think some of the trends we've seen during COVID will persist, and some will reverse to some extent. I think we've definitely seen an irreversible shift towards digital overall, and I think people are much happier with transacting online, consulting online, things that they're not necessarily used to doing in many cases. So I think there are some permanent shifts there. I think we'll have to wait and see how permanent they are, but I couldn't see things going backwards because they never do. They always continue. So I think that's going to be likely to be a significant shift. In terms of the actual exhibitions, I noticed the calendars have filled up for the rest of this year. So there's a jewelry show in Qatar. We're obviously hosting an event in Dubai in May. I believe JCK Las Vegas, IJT in Japan is going ahead. So I think people are certainly regaining confidence in travel, and footfall should be increasing to these events. So I think they will regain some of their lost glory. But I think overall there's going to be a significant amount of traction that will be retained by digital channels and virtual. Because it's so much more convenient for people to interact that way.
Yeah, and a lot of people in the exhibitions industry sense that we're heading for a sort of a hybrid solution going forward, sort of a combination of in-person physical trade shows with digital solutions sort of bolted on, digital rooms, for example, and opportunities to make Zoom calls with people while at shows and to order at shows, as well as the benefits of networking in person. We have a question from the Urban Quote God. That's an interesting name. What is the market like for Colombian emeralds and Colombian emerald jewellery in London?
Yeah, it's fairly strong. I would say that the biggest market in the world for Colombian emeralds is the US, followed by Asia. So Europe is not as big a market globally as Asia and North America are, but there is certainly a strong market here. And actually, you only have to look around many of the shops in the West End and in Hatton Garden, and you'll see a lot of coloured jewelleries appearing in their displays. So I think it's definitely rising in prominence, and I think that's a positive trend that we've seen over the last 10 years or more. And that seems to be continuing. I think, the dash for colour and individuality is driving that, and that's being seen across the whole world.
Could you tell us, Phil, a little bit about how you use diamonds in combination with Colombian fine emerald jewellery? I know in a number of your pieces you have beautiful white diamonds combined with the emeralds, and the colour contrast works really nicely. Tell us a little bit about how you source the diamonds and what your standards are in terms of the diamonds that you use. Presumably it's just natural diamonds, not lab grown?
Yes, predominantly it's natural diamonds. We have, where people have specifically requested lab-grown diamonds, we have sourced them. We don't tend to market them, but if people want them, we can certainly source them. And yeah, diamonds are a wonderful complement to emeralds. They work very well in combination, especially in trilogy and halo settings. We've focused very much on that combination in a lot of our pieces. I think that there's a long tradition of that. There's a lot of Victorian jewellery, for example, that contain emeralds and diamonds. So there's a long heritage that comes with that. But in terms of how we source the diamonds, we buy them from trusted brokers, dealers around the world, and we obviously carefully inspect their responsible sourcing policies before we work with them. So we have that confidence that they're not just KP compliant, Kimberley process, but they have the correct responsible sourcing policies in place. And we're actually going through our audit process for the Responsible Jewellery Council at the moment. So that's very important, a very important aspect for us as well.
Yeah. So what is really clear in your messaging is that the jewellery that London DE Fine Jewellery present is all of it is responsibly sourced, isn't it? Scrupulously, and you do everything possible to audit the supply chain from the mine to the finger, if you like. Question from Jahan ZaiBQ01. What can you tell us about the sizes of emeralds that are extracted from the mines in Colombia? Is it very rare indeed to find a very, very large emerald in size? What can you tell us about size?
Yes, I mean typically, most of the stones that we deal with are between half a carat and 10 carats. So it's quite rare that we deal outside of that sort of range. But yes, they are found in very very large sizes. I think it's an extremely rare occurrence. But that's typically the main sort of size range that we work with and that we know well.
Okay, very good. So, are you looking to work with other types of colored gemstones? Clearly, the focus of your business is Colombian emerald fine jewellery, and often in combination with diamonds, and also recycled 18-karat gold. Are you looking potentially to work with other types of colored gemstones, or is it very much driven by the customer in a bespoke order?
No, we do actually do quite a few, particularly ruby and sapphire corundum pieces. So it's something that we do on a regular basis, and we are interested in doing more on that side. We are, in particular, I'm attending some conferences in Singapore in the summer. We're looking at potentially some tie-ins and some relationships with some of the gemstone suppliers from that part of the world. So yeah, it's something that's very much on our radar. Sapphire and ruby in particular are extremely popular at the moment, and it's a big part of the market that has some huge potential. Obviously, we have the close relationship with the supply chains through Colombia, so our focus has been traditionally on Colombian emeralds and also diamonds. Yeah, we are very much ear to the ground in terms of other colored gemstones and the opportunities that they present.
Yeah. We've got a question again from the Urban Quote God, who obviously wasn't here right at the beginning, but if you could just briefly answer this one, Phil. How do you start working with rough emeralds, and if so, with which mines do you work?
Okay, so we generally source our stones cut and polished. So we don't generally cut and polish them ourselves. So we mostly deal with the sort of top tier dealers in Bogota. The exception being we do sometimes buy rough material, and we do sometimes source and supply rough emerald jewelry, for example, the emerald charms that are on our website. In terms of the mines that we actually source them from, the majority of them are in Muso. I've visited nearly all of them. Some are in Muso, some are in Chivor. The actual mine names are on our Instagram feed. So if you want to look at some of the mines we visited, they're actually detailed on there. And that's where we've gone through the process of examining the processes and the standards that are applied when those mines are operating.
We have a question from Vahid Ahadnejad. Hello, Vahid. Vahid is a very well-respected Iranian professor of gemology based in Tehran. And he asks, we talked earlier about alternative origins for emeralds to Colombia. If you were to look at these origins, Panjshir, Afghanistan, Zambia or Ethiopia, which would give the most, if you like, general competition to premium Colombian emeralds among those origins?
It's a very interesting question. I've seen a lot of very, very fine material from all of those sources. I've never dealt with them in much detail. I've never sourced many stones from those parts of the world, so I can't really speak from much personal experience. But from what I gather, Afghan and Pakistan material from the Swat Valley, for example, is probably the nearest competitor that we have in terms of Colombian emeralds.
And a question from V945, who may not have been watching the interview at the start, but how did you start working and dealing with Colombian emeralds? And tell us a little bit about your background. In fact, Phil, it might be interesting to know about your naval background as well, a little bit.
Sure. Yeah. So, for the past 10 years, I've been involved in the industry directly. As a gemstone dealer and jeweler. Prior to that, I served in the Royal Navy for a number of years, working on various warships, working in bridge navigation, essentially. But I arrived at the jewellery industry because I have a long-standing interest and passion for jewellery and gemstones, which goes back to childhood and family who were in the jewellery industry. I also have a number of family, friends, and acquaintances who have connections with the Colombian emerald market. So that was how I became interested. I always had a passion for coloured gemstones. So it was through those connections and friendships that I had with people directly involved in the Colombian emerald trade that I then developed a passion for Colombian emeralds. And then that crystallized into a business plan around 10 years ago. And that was how we became directly involved in that particular market.
Zarza _by_Nivea asks, what is your own favorite cut for emeralds, other than perhaps the traditional emerald cut? And also, have you ever seen an emerald that really just took your breath away? And what kind of jewelry design did that end up included in?
Sure. I've recently made some jewelry that's a beautiful pear cut emeralds. I think actually some of the so much material is emerald cut that it's actually quite nice, quite refreshing to see some pieces that are different shapes. So we've made, for example, a beautiful pair of pear earrings recently, emerald earrings, and I think they're probably some of the nicest stones I've ever seen, actually. So yeah, that's probably my favourite cut, other than emeralds.
Excellent. Tell us a little bit about the recent opening of the Dubai office, which was just last month, wasn't it? And also about the activities that you are engaged in Dubai. I know that, for example, you may be involved in selling emeralds there and also in the sourcing of precious metals. So tell us a little bit about, if you like, the range of activities in Dubai that you're embarking upon now.
Sure. Yeah. So, as you rightly say, we opened our office in the DMCC, which is the Dubai Multi-Commodity Centre, in January. So we're now located in the Almas Tower, which is in the centre of DMCC, for those who know Dubai. And the main aim there is to essentially act as a conduit for the supply of ethically sourced Colombian emeralds to other businesses in the UAE, but also to supply the local market, which is vast, for fine luxury jewellery, in particular coloured gemstone and diamond jewellery. So there's the two aspects to the business, and that's the rationale behind establishing a base there. We're actually organising an international emerald conference in Dubai in May to raise the profile of what we're doing there and the Colombian emerald market in the Middle East.
Excellent, very good. And could you tell us a little bit more about that Dubai event that you're planning in May, what it is and who will be there? I think there's one well-known author who will be making an appearance there.
That's correct, yeah. So it's on the 12th and the 13th of May in the DMCC in Dubai itself, in the Almas Tower. And we have, as you rightly say, a number of key speakers, including the CEO of the DMCC, Ahmed bin Salem. We also have the CEO of CD Tech GemLab from Colombia joining us, as well as some leading journalists and emerald experts from Colombia and well-known authors, including people from the New York Times, The Economist, Telegraph Luxury, Condé Nast, Retail Jeweler, Professional Jeweler, and a host of bloggers and influencers. So it should be a very interesting event. And really quite unique in terms of the actual breadth and depth of people we have attending from all angles, from the journalistic world to the academic world to the gemological world to some of the key investors who've backed us and some of their associates. So I think it will be a very interesting event. And also it'll be a chance to showcase what we're doing in the DMCC, but also the DMCC itself and what that has to offer the world. I hope it'll be a two-way process in terms of raising the profile of the fantastic opportunities there are in Dubai for international businesses.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Phil. Our hour has shot by. Thank you very much indeed for presenting London DE Fine Jewellery to everybody, which is a purveyor of fine, responsibly sourced Colombian emerald jewellery, often set with diamonds, as well as other coloured gemstones too are in the mix. And bespoke appointments can be set up by sending a DM to the London DE Fine Jewellery Instagram account. And thanks for also giving us so much information about the emerald market and the fascination and demand for emeralds, and also, if you like, the importance of the origin of Colombia as in terms of premium emeralds. Thanks so much for your time. Thanks everybody for watching, and keep an eye out for the post for the next Jewellery Outlook Instagram Live. Bye for now. Bye everybody. Bye bye.
Thank you.